Hey gang, what's going on? James here and welcome back to Fan Theories. No, I have not come up with a better title yet. This is where I give you my opinions, viewpoints, and theories to some of my favorite movies. Now, this episode's going to be a little different because it's not really a theory as it is more of a suggestion. Recently, Universal Studios has announced that they're going to create a shared universe, and it's going to consist of the Universal monsters. Frankenstein, the Wolfman, Dracula, so on. So they already put one movie out, The Mummy. It wasn't very good. So they decided to put the shared universe on pause until they can kind of work out the kinks. Now, I have a few ideas on where they can take this. Now, I will say this. A lot of people are going to say that, oh, you're just ripping off Marvel. Probably. But isn't everybody who's creating a shared universe already ripping off Marvel? So am I ripping off Marvel? Maybe, but I'm not doing anything that hasn't been done before. So for them to take this forward, I have a few thoughts. One, in this whole series, you have to have a central theme. And I think the central theme of the monsters is finding their humanity. Now, I love the Universal monsters. I have all the movies. I've watched them over 100 times. There is more depth there than people realize. So I think in order to make new audiences catch on to these characters is you have to make them relatable. So one of the things I first thought of is the term monster. What does monster mean? Well, monster is a relative term. A monster is a term used to describe something that someone doesn't understand. A monster is also a lack of humanity. So I think all these movies have to be about how these people regain their humanity. Number two, you need to have a central villain through the whole thing. And I think that central villain needs to be Dracula. Dracula is content with who he is. Dracula doesn't want to change who he is. Dracula doesn't want to go back to being a mortal person. He just wants to keep being a vampire. Dracula is perfectly happy being Dracula. So, if you have one person who is content with being themselves and all these other characters trying to gain their humanity, it soon becomes them against the one. So in that sense, I would really kick off the shared universe with Dracula being the first film and not The Mummy. Now you can go a couple different directions with where you want this to go. My own personal opinion, I would have a series of movies leading up to one movie with all the monsters in it. Now I know what you're thinking, it's very much like the Avengers. That may be, but if you look back to the Universal horror films of the 30s and 40s, that's essentially what it was too. You know, granted you didn't have the Mummy or the Invisible Man in it, but you had Frankenstein, Dracula, and the Wolfman all meeting up in a couple of different movies. So this idea really isn't anything new, you're just adding more players. To make these movies relatable, you have to have some kind of human quality in it. And I think each monster represents a different aspect or character trait. For instance, the theme of Frankenstein is more or less trying to find your place in this world, in a world that doesn't want you. And everybody can relate to that. Everybody at some point has questioned themselves saying, why am I here? What do I want out of life? What's my purpose? What do I do? So I think that needs to be your central theme for Frankenstein. Now the Wolfman is all about a man who has to deal with the consequences of his actions. Even though he doesn't choose to be a werewolf, he still has to deal with it. Yes, he kills people, yes, he hurts people, but nobody else believes that Lawrence Talbot is the Wolfman. The only person who thinks Lawrence Talbot is a monster is Lawrence Talbot. Now, the Invisible Man has a couple of different ideas that you can throw around with it. The first idea is that this is a man who is consumed by his work. A man who is consumed by his work so much that he cast out his friends and family. So there is a human quality in there, almost like a father making up for lost time because he spent so much time at work. And again, the term monster is used here to describe something that someone doesn't fully understand. Now, the central theme for The Bride of Frankenstein is going to be love. Now, dovetailing off of Frankenstein and the central theme of where you fit in this world, The Bride would tell how, okay, you found your place in this world, and now there's this other person who is also going through the same thing that you have gone through, and you are connecting. But there are things keeping you apart, and how do you overcome those things? Now, The Mummy has always been a difficult one for me, because even though I love The Mummy, I have some issues on where they can take this. So I started looking at the Mummy series as a whole, and not just the original Boris Karloff Mummy. I started thinking about the Tana leaves and the High Priestess that brings the Mummy back to life. I think The Mummy is essentially about moving forward despite your past. Because everybody has something in their past that they're not proud of, and it's only learning from that that you're able to move forward. And I think that's what The Mummy is really about. Now, Frankenstein meets the Wolfman. This would be the first movie, really, that you have a connection with all the other movies, besides The Bride and little snippets here and there, commenting on the other movies. But the overall theme of Frankenstein meets the Wolfman is two people with a common objective, but different means to obtain that goal. Essentially what happens when people with two big personalities clash. And there you have Frankenstein meets the Wolfman. Now for the final movie in the series, where all the monsters team up against the common enemy, it took me a minute to figure out what the theme for this would be. Then I realized that flaws aren't anything to hide behind. Flaws make people who they are, is a normal part of human nature. This final movie needs to be about how we embrace those flaws. Flaws make us who we are. We cannot control what other people think of us. We can only control how we think of ourselves. And I think that is the central message that the Universal monsters will have to portray in this new shared universe. Now, for the sake of the movie aspect of it, now you will have to borrow some elements from the Marvel Cinematic Universe, where you have nods to other characters, locations, even mid-credit scenes. You have to build this franchise from the ground up. You have to make something that the older fans will remember and love, something that the new generation will grab onto. So I do have some ideas. I wrote down some little ideas on how those movies can be done and basic plot points, but I won't get into all that. Essentially, it can be done. You just have to follow a formula. Maybe it is ripping off Marvel. Marvel laid the groundwork, and now it's up to Universal Studios to put the building up, if that makes sense. So I hope they get things up and running soon. I hope they take it in a direction that's fun and exciting. Let's not forget scary. So there you have my theory on the Dark Universe, Universal Studios' answer to their own shared universe. Let me know what you think. Put it in the comments below. We'll see you guys next time.